think, there you go, I'm online. Okay, so last week we began to look at word parts and we began to look how we can break words down. So for the beginning of the lesson, we're going to quickly revise some of the points from last week. And we're going to continue with some roots, some new roots that we didn't see last week. And then we're going to hopefully end the lesson by looking at some suffixes and looking at what a suffix actually does and its contribution to the overall meaning of the word, but how we use that within a sentence. So let's start with some quick revision from last week. So word parts and how they can help us understand vocabulary and what the word actually means. Get a little bit comfortable here. Can you still see me? Okay. So we looked at prefixes to begin with. I think I should actually. We looked at prefixes to begin with, and we saw that prefixes are used to modify a root or stem. And what I meant by modify last week was to actually add a particular meaning to that word, not change the meaning of the root or stem, but add a meaning. We saw that there may be more than one prefix present in a word, and as an example, we saw reincarnation last week, and we looked at the prefix re, which meant back, and then we looked at the prefix in, which meant into. And we saw that prefixes can have many different meanings. For example, we looked at prefixes to do with negation, and we looked at one, dis, which means away from. It's not just negative, it means away from something. And an example there that we looked at last week was dislike. Then we saw unpopular, and then we saw impossible. Then we saw in with indecisive, and we saw ir with irregular, and then we saw ill with illegal. And if you remember from last week's lesson, we use im with words that begin with M, P, or B. We use R or ir with words that begin with R, such as regular. And with ill, we use with words which begin with L. All of the other sounds, we actually begin with in. So D is not P, B, M, it's not an R, and it's not an L. It's a different sound. So we say indecisive. We also looked at prefixes which showed direction. We saw the prefix X, meaning out of, as in the example export. When we export things are being carried out of the country. We also saw the prefix im, meaning into, such as import, things being carried into a country. We saw con, which also meant together. So if you imagine a conversation, you can only converse with people if there's other people there, people talking together. We saw that co also had the same meaning together or with, and we had it there with the word cooperate. We also have com, that's another one which means the same as together or with, such as con and co. So we've got con, communication, community, communism, a word we'll be looking at later. And we also have col, C-O-L, which also means together or with, such as collection. Then we saw the prefix re. Re actually has two meanings. First meaning, it means to do again. For example, redo or re-say. But in terms of direction, re means back, and we saw the example with reverse, meaning to go back. So a car drives forward and then it drives back. Volume up, please, really. Volume problem, ready. And then we saw pro, meaning forward, as in the example product, and we saw that duct meant to lead last week. So a product is something which is led through a factory. We've got step 1, then it moves to step 2, and then it moves to step 3. If we look at the general term of product, things that we buy in the shops, it goes from the shop and it's led forward to the consumer. Then we saw the prefix D, which means down, and we looked at the example decrease, but we also saw last week that D means away from. such as in the word that we saw, deport. And then finally we saw sub, which means under. So we also saw that prefixes, not only did they show negation or show direction, but they have a plethora. They have a number of meanings, or other meanings as well. And we looked at some of these. We saw uni meant one, as in unicycle, a bicycle with one wheel, very much like what the clowns use in a circus. We saw that bi meant two, bicycle. Of course, a bicycle has two wheels. Cycle means wheel. Then we saw that tri means three, so a tricycle would be something that maybe a young child would use, a bike with three wheels, one at the front and two at the back. We saw X meant former. I think in Turkish this would be translated as eski, but it doesn't mean old. You know, we don't say old. We mean, when we say former, we mean the one before, former prime minister, former president, or maybe the ex-presidents, etc. Then we saw that for meant before, as in to foretell. To foretell means to predict or to tell something to say that something's going to happen before it actually happens. And we saw that post meant after, such as postgraduates. And just a quick recap here, we've got this hyphen in the middle here. And if you remember, we use that hyphen because graduate is actually a noun or a noun form. It's an unusual noun form. It's used in an adjective suffix, but nevertheless, it's a noun. And so we have the hyphen there. I think we've got another example. Yep, with pre. Pre means before. And again, we have that hyphen there because intermediate is a noun form here. Then we had trans, as in transport, and port, if you remember, means to carry. So transport is something which carries goods from one place to another, or it carries people from one place to another. Then we have pro, which means for, to support an idea, such as pro-democracy or pro-feminism. And then we have anti, which is the opposite, which means against. And we saw last week anti has two pronunciations. We have anti, I think it's British English, and anti is American English. Both are acceptable. You know, you're going to be understood regardless as to what one you're going to use. And we had the example there, anti-democratic or anti-democratic. And we also saw some roots. And we saw that roots, like word stems, you know, if we take a root, that's what the prefix attaches to, and that's what the suffix attaches to at the back of the word. But roots, unlike word stems are a little bit more limited in terms of their meaning. A root, however, has a solid meaning that we can actually find in many different words. A large number of words can actually be made up from a single root, as we saw last week. Buy one free, buy five, get one free, you know, or buy one, get five free. So some of the roots we saw last week were port, meaning to carry. We had portable, we had import, export, deport, report. We also had side, meaning to kill, as in matricide, to kill your mother, patricide, to kill your father, filicide. I don't know, does anybody remember the meaning of the word fili? Probably not. It means son or daughter in Latin. So filicide would be to kill your son or to kill your daughter. We also have, yes, that's maniac. Okay, yes, what would you like to say? Lesson, crazy lesson, maniac? Yes, of course, say something. Hello. Oops. Maybe I have to answer here. Hey. Ask away. There we go. I'm waiting for your reply. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, so we also saw dict, coming from the Latin dictare, meaning to say or tell, and we saw that with the word dictator. A dictator, of course, is someone who tells other people what to do. We saw tract. Tract meant to pull. meant to pull, and we saw that in the word attractive. And an easy way to remember this would be to think of the Turkish word çekici, çekmek. What does çekmek mean in English? It means to pull. We also saw spect, as in spectator, and we saw that meant to look or to see. A spectator is someone who looks at something. Then we saw the root dat, as in education, which means to lead. And if you think about the role of a teacher in the classroom, their job is to lead a student from knowing nothing to hopefully knowing something. Yeah, we're going to do that very soon, actually. But before we do that, before we do that, we're going to have a look at what these pieces actually mean. Next week's lesson, we'll be looking at all of these pieces together, prefixes, suffixes, and roots, and trying to understand some really difficult vocabulary using these. We saw that cred meant credible, as in believe, and we had incredible, inanılmaz. Then we had vene and vent, meaning to come or go. And then we had vis, or vid, meaning to see or to watch. So let's look at some more roots. And this is where you get to participate, Adem. So we have manual, manicure, manipulate, manufacture, and manage. Can anybody tell me what the root is that we're using here? I'll just give you a couple of seconds to answer. Okay, well, the root that we're looking at is actually man or manu. Would anybody like to have a guess as to what that actually means? Very good, Adam. Man. Well done. Do you know the meaning of the word? Well, the meaning of the word means hand. If we look at a manual car, for example, a manual car is one which is controlled with a stick. We control it by hand. A manicure, like a pedicure, a manicure is the way that we look after the nails on the hand. To manipulate means to change the shape by hand. Manufacture means to make by hand. And then we have manage, to handle something, to have the ability to control something. In the next root, we have disrupt, interrupt, rupture, bankrupt, and abrupt. And I'm going to quickly see if my telephone's quicker than my... Okay. So can anybody tell me the root here? Are them a masculine word? What do you mean a masculine word? You know, in English, we don't really have an idea of feminine, masculine, or neutral. You know, although we're a Germanic language, we got rid of that stuff a long time ago. So I don't really know what you mean by masculine. Grammatically masculine, or I don't know, like man as in mankind. Man in mankind comes from human. You know, it's a short form of that. Okay. So here the root is actually rupt. And rupt means to break. And if you remember this here, the root here, the prefix here meant away from. So disrupt technically means to break away from. If you're doing something and something outside happens which takes your attention away, it has disrupted you. Of course, we can use it in a greater sense of the word. For example, I don't know, the coronavirus has disrupted everybody's wedding plans or everybody's summer plans. You know. To interrupt, here we had inter, which meant into or between. So interrupt means to break in between. And if we have two people talking, we can imagine the third person breaking in between those two people, interrupting those two people, stopping that process of conversation taking place. Rupture, down here, simply means a break. Sometimes you can break your leg completely, but sometimes you can break your leg slightly, and that would be called a rupture. Yeah, very good, Adam. Interrupt someone while speaking. Excellent. A great example. We also have bankrupt, which is what happens to businesses when they can't pay their debts and no longer pay their employees. Sometimes they file for bankruptcy at the bank. And then we have abrupt, which means sudden or expected. So, I don't know, a quick example. He abruptly came into the room, if we use it in terms of an adverb form. He suddenly came into the room. We also have another one, vocabulary. Let's see if you can do this a little bit quicker, Adam. So we've got vocabulary, we have vocal, we have vociferous, we have irrevocable, and we have provoke. Just some quick tips on pronunciation here. It's actually quite a mouthful for me. I can't imagine how difficult it must be for you too. So we've got vocabulary. We've got vocal. It's not vocal or vocal. Here, as we discussed last week, we have that sound. We'll be looking at this suffix later today, so it becomes vocal, like kul in Turkish. Here we've got the same sound, v, sif, So we've got that same sound, vociferous. And here that sound, it looks like an us. Sometimes people say jealous or jealous. It's actually an sound. Vociferous. Here we've got a short I, ear, re, vo, k, and we've got that sound again. Irrevocable. And here we've got two ways to actually say this. It would actually be not provoke, but provoke. We've got that same sound again, provoke. So can anybody tell me what the phonological lessons, well, teaching phonological, you mean phonetic, some basic sound lessons. We'll be looking at basic pronunciation a little bit later on today with suffixes. And we'll be looking at the phonemes and the sounds of language, maybe in another lesson. Abrupt is a term used for volcano. No, that would be erupt. E-R-U-P-T. A volcano erupts. It doesn't abrupt. Abrupt means sudden. But it has the same root. Rupt. You know, erupt. E there means out. Like emit, to, out. So we have erupt, to break out of the volcano. Ab means away from. So it means to break away from. If you imagine everybody in the classroom, they're studying, they're doing what they're doing, and then suddenly, I don't know, Janali comes into the classroom. You know, merhaba ben geldim, sort of attitude, and everyone, look, what's happening? You know, Janali has abruptly entered the classroom. He's done it suddenly, unexpectedly, and caused people to be a little bit like, what's happening? So they've literally broken away from what they were doing. So going back to, you're welcome, Artem. I like you, man. Yeah, very good. So with vocabulary, can we guess, Artem, what the actual root is? Do we have anyone else? Hussein, Dursun, sort of here, sort of not here? The root is actually voc. And can we guess what it means very quickly? Well, I've already done the pronunciation part. Voc, very good, Adam. And the meaning is to call. So vocabulary is basically what we call objects in the world. Again, vocabulary. Vocal, for example, vocal is to do with a voice. If someone is vocal, they talk a lot of sound comes out of their noise, out of their mouth. Vociferous, well, you know, to speak loudly and forcefully. You know, it's not just loud, it's also forcefully. So I don't know, if you think about vociferous, maybe Donald Trump when he's talking to the reporters, you know, he goes, oh, that's a very rude question, or I think you're being very bad. You know, he speaks very loudly and very rudely and, you know, obnoxiously. That would be someone who is vociferous. And then we have irrevocable. And ear, if you remember from earlier on today and last week, means not. And here, re means back. So something which, and abu means can. So something which, and don't forget, we read it like you would Arabic. We read from right to left. I know we write from left to right very confusingly, but to understand a word, you start here sometimes. So maybe not able, because we have the negative, not able to call back. Maybe if you say a really harsh word to your mother and it hurts her, or you say something horrible to a friend and it hurts their feelings. Sometimes you can't take those words back. Sometimes what you have done is irrevocable. And again, we've got the bull sound. Just want to emphasize that. Then we've got provoke. To provoke, pro means forward. To provoke means to call forward. And if you imagine two Turkish boys having a fight, you know, one's going, hadi lan sen vur. Önceden sen vuracaksın, you know, and the other's like, sen vuracaksın. You know, they're provoking each other. So cacophonous, euphony, phonetics, telephone, saxophone. We'll just quickly go over some of these parts. Cacophonous, cacophonous. Again, we've got that sound. Cacophonous, cacophonous. It's not cacophonous. Cacophonous. Then here it's a strange one. It's a Greek one, if I remember correctly. It means good. So we've got euphony, euphony. Then here we have phonetics, phonetics. And again, we've got that sound. It's not phonetics, it's phonetics. And the stress of the word is just here. Then, of course, one that we all know, telephone. And down here we have saxophone. Again, we've got that sound, saxophone. Some people may say saxophone, but it's actually saxophone. So what's the root? So what's the root here? Very, very good. Yes, Arden, fun. It's the root of all of them. And can you tell me what it actually means? I can't see anybody else online, actually. It seems like Ardem's the only one here. Oh, there we go, Neslihan, welcome. And there you go, Mr. Fati. Well done. Fun as well. Welcome to the class, Neslihan and Fati. Nice to see you participating. So it means sound. A cacophonous sound is a sound which isn't very pleasant to the ear. For example, the sound of children. Well, the sound of children. Some people like the sound of children, but I don't like the sound of children. You know, you know, it's a cacophony of sound. It's sound which I find very unpleasant to the ear. An adjective for that, of course, would be cacophonous. Euphony, the noun form, we could say euphonous, meaning something which sounds very good or very pleasant to the ear. Classical music, I find very delightful to listen to. That would be an example of euphony. Then we've got phonetics, which is the study of sound in language. And hopefully one day I'll be doing a lesson on phonetics and pronunciation. I think that was a really great idea, Arden. Then we've got telephone. And finally, saxophone. Sax here doesn't really have a meaning. If I remember correctly, he was a Belgian musical instrument maker. I think Adolf Sax, or Sax, probably be the correct pronunciation. So that the saxophone is actually named after him. And again, we have this sound. Of course, saxophones make sound. So let's look at another one, inanimate. Let's see how you do, Fatih, Neslihan, and Adem. And anybody else who's watching, you know, anybody who's watching this, please participate. It'd be nice to see you join. You know, it's not just for upper intermediate or advanced students, even a pre-intermediate student. These are the basic of languages. An intermediate student will be able to gain from this too. So don't be shy. You're going to make a mistake, but mistakes are fantastic. We learn by making mistakes. So we have inanimate, we have animal, we have reanimate, we have animation, and we have equanimous. So let's have a look at some of the pronunciation here. Whilst you're trying to find the roots, I'll go through and say some of these words. So we've got inanimate, inanimate, inanimate. And you see it when you say it quickly, inanimate. Again, we've got that sound, inanimate. Not inanimate, inanimate. And here we've got a suffix for an adjective. We'll come back to suffixes a little bit later. Again, here, this A here at the very end. Listen to it. Animal, animal. It's not animal or animal, as in the German A. It's animal. Soft. We've got that schwa sound. Reanimate, reanimate. Now, can you see that sound here? Ani. We've got inanimate, and then it becomes reanimate, because here we now have a verb form. It's changed the sound of that. And the stress has changed too. Then we're down here, we have animation. And again, we've got that sound, that schwa sound. Animation, animation. Then we have, I don't know where I found this vocabulary. Then we have equanimous. Equanimous. Got that sound here. It's not us or aus. It's us, equanimous. And very good, Panache. 100% Neslihan. Welcome to the class, Panache. Nice to see you here. Neslihan, very good. It means, sorry, the root is actually anima. Could you tell me what the meaning of that root is? Have a guess. I'll go through the pronunciation one more time. Inanimate, 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 animal, 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 reanimate, 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 animation, animation, animation. And then we have, I'm not saying this 3 times, equanimous, equanimous, equanimous. And even when we say that quickly, equanimous, equanimous, you know, naturally my voice goes, it tries to find that sound. It's a very common sound in English. You know, we don't just use it in vocabulary, we also use it to shorten sentences. So how do you do would be a strong form. You know, this is how we teach and this is how you learn. But in spoken English, we actually say, how do you do? How do you do? So it's not do you, it's do you, you know. So how do you do? And the meaning, movement, not too bad, Adam, not correct, but almost close, almost close. It means spirit or mind. So inanimate, if you remember from earlier, in is negative. So if something is inanimate, it's not moving or not alive. This glass of water, from which I shall drink, this glass has no spirit. It's not alive. It's inanimate. Animal, of course, an animal is something with spirit, such as human beings. We're animals. Reanimate, if you remember back here, reanimate, had 2 meanings. It means again or it means back. And here means back. So it means to bring the spirit back, to bring life back to something. Reanimate Frankenstein's monster, for example. Frankenstein's monster was reanimated by Dr. Frankenstein. We, of course, have animation, like cartoons, where they're made to look alive. And then we have equanimous, which is more of this meaning here, mind. Equanimous, if you're calm and in control of your thoughts, you're being equanimous. Very much like the Buddha, I should imagine. So we'll go through a couple more. We've got capit, decapitate, captain, capitalize, and capitalism. So some quick pronunciation while you're trying to find a root there. Last word is not seen. What's the last word? Okay, thank you very much, Captain Ersan. Wait a minute, I'm going to do you a favor. Okay, I think there you go. I've turned the camera off. I'm solving this easily. Thank you, Captain Adam. Thank you. Cap, well done, Adam. Cap is actually the root. We'll go through some of the pronunciation. Again, we've got this it's not al or al, it's capital. Capital. We have decapitate. Again, we've got that suffix there which lengthens this sound. Decapitate. Not decapitate, decapitate. Ate as a suffix usually lengthens the vowels beforehand. Then we have captain, captain, which is more of an I sound as opposed to an A sound. Captain, actually that would be the better way to explain it. Then we have capitalize. And if you listen again, listen to that sound. Capitalize, capitalize, capitalize. And here I know the I is pronounced like I, as in the word, because we've got this silent E here. And here, decapitate, A, with silent E, tells me that this should be pronounced like the alphabet letter, decapitate. And here we've got the silent E again, and it's telling me that I should pronounce this word like the alphabet letter. Whoops, I. And of course the meaning is head. And I've just actually pressed that by accident. And we've got capitalism. Again, we've got that sound, capitalism, and it means head. Capital, of course, the capital city is where the head of state is situated. Decapitate, D, you know, it could mean off, it could mean away from, you know. But I like the off sort of meaning here. Who was her name? One of the French queens, off with their heads. Decapitate means to cut the head off of someone. Captain is the head of a team. To capitalize, well, would actually to make profit for oneself, you know, for your head. And capitalism, of course, is a state of politics in which, you know, we have free trade and market in which we can, again, make profit for ourselves. One more, I think. Oh, reincarnation. We saw this example at the beginning of the lesson, and we also saw it last week. Reincarnation. Carnage, one of my favorites. Carnivore. Carrion. And incarnation. Some lovely vocabulary here. Reincarnation is the same in Turkish, but I'll go through the pronunciation whilst you're trying to find that. We have reincarnation. Again, we have that sound. Reincarnation. And this is, of course, sh sound. Reincarnation. Then we have, again, we've got that sound here. Carnage. Well, it's actually an E. Carnage. Ij. Sorry, that's actually a suffix. Then we have carnivore. Again, we have that silent E. And if you look at this vowel here, it's the letter O. So I know, if you look up here, O, it's reincarnation. But I know now, because of this silent E, that I have to pronounce this O. So it becomes carnivore, or. It's got an or sound, it's a long sound. Then we have carrion, carrion. And this O has become a very short sound now. Carrion. And then we have incarnation. Again, we've got that shin sound. So let's have a quick look. Has anybody found it? Reincarnation shows the differences of prefixes. Yes, of course it does. It does. Well, you know, if you joined last week's lesson, and as I stated at the beginning of the lesson, Adam, you know, we can have more than one prefix. Can we find the root is can? Thank you. There we go. And let's just have a look at these prefixes here. We've got re, meaning back, and in, meaning into. So reincarnation, being born, the process of coming back into flesh form. We've got carnage. Carnage. So if you can imagine in, I suppose, Africa, you know, they have some horrible wars in some places, and they go and killing thousands of people at a time in some villages. Well, with all of those dead bodies, all of that killing, we call that carnage. Carnivore, of course, vor means to eat. So a carnivore is an animal that eats meat, like cats, for example. Carrion just basically means dead flesh. And then we have incarnation. And, you know, this looks like it could be maybe negative, but it's not negative. Here, in means into. So to be into flesh. And another word for this is personify. And another word would be embody. So if we think of everything that is evil or bad, and we try to give this idea or concept a human form, then we could maybe draw a comparison with maybe Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler is the incarnation of death, of evil, sorry. Or we could say Adolf Hitler is the personification of evil. And we could also say, an important word for TOEFL, by the way, Adolf Hitler is the embodiment of evil. So all of those words have basically the same meaning. Etobus. You can see me very shortly. So kan means flesh. We're coming to the end of that one. Let's just get out of there. I'll put the camera back up, number one. I should be coming back up now. And we'll start very quickly with suffixes. There you go, I'm back down there. Slideshow from the beginning. So suffixes can be very, very confusing. You know, when we look at word parts as a whole, we need to remember that language does change. Sometimes knowing a root isn't always going to help you understand the meaning of that word. If we take an example of the root ter, T-E-R-R, ter, it means fear, it means horror. For example, terrible. If something is terrible, then it's not very pleasant. Maybe if we're talking about food, it's terrible food. It's food that you can't eat, or if you try to eat it, it's actually disgusting. We have the word terrorist. A terrorist is a person who goes out and uses fear for their own personal gain. But then we also have the adjective terrific. Now, terrific actually comes from the same root, such as same root as terrorism or terrorist or terrible. But terrific over time has developed a positive meaning. So if you imagine you go to the Luna Park or the amusement park, as we say in English, and you go on a roller coaster. Why do you go on a roller coaster? You know, you scream, continuously scream, but you have fun. So from there we have the adjective terrific, which meant originally something very bad or frightening, to being used in a modern term more recently, meaning something which is very good. That's terrific, which also means that's amazing, that's superb, that's fantastic. A lot of negative adjectives in English actually are used in a positive way. I think it might be an English thing, but my nephew came to visit me last week and he said, you know, that's sick. Now, sick for me, of course, kusmak, you know, it has a negative connotation, but for my nephew's generation, he's 19 now, sick has actually a positive connotation. It means it's good, or it's fantastic, or it's terrific. The way in which these parts are put together as well, you know, we have, if it's a Latin root, then we can only connect it to a Latin prefix and a Latin suffix. If it's a Greek root, then it can only be connected with a Greek prefix or a Greek suffix. So you have stupid rules like that. They are changing as time goes by. The English language is changing. It no longer belongs to us, actually. The English language belongs to the rest of the world. There's more non-native speakers than there are native speakers. So there's some things that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with this. These problems become a little bit more apparent with suffixes, because an adjective of the past can now be used as a noun, or a noun in the past can now be used as an adjective or a verb. So I'm going to give you some of the basic suffixes, but of course these suffixes can also be used for other things. There's always going to be an exception to the rule. You're never going to have a 100% rule in English. You may have a 70% rule or an 80% rule, but you know, 20% or 30% of the vocabulary, or maybe even 10% of the vocabulary, isn't always going to work the way that you think it works, because language changes. You know, even if you think, like in the Turkish language, once upon a time, you had those little shapkas above the alphabet. You don't use them anymore. Language changes. We have something like, I don't know. Oh, we'll talk about that later. So let's get on with suffixes. So suffixes, what do they do? Well, unlike prefixes, suffixes have a limited meaning. In terms of meaning or understanding the meaning of the word, they contribute very little. Oh, Adam, look at you go, lexical or bound morphemes. Wow, Jesus, man. All right, we'll see about that. I don't want to say no. But I think it falls out of the scope of what we're doing as a school. You know, morphemes, you're getting a little bit more technical here with language. It's nice to see that you're going deep into language. Do you study linguistics by any chance? Wow, lexical or bound morphemes. Look at you go. Okay, maybe one day. Would you say inshallah? You know, inshallah, that future never comes, does it? So they're limited in meaning when in terms of a word. And we also use suffixes at the end of the word. They tell us what type of word we're dealing with primarily. You know, that's their main function these days. They tell us if a word is a noun. And as a result, they tell us how we can use that in a sentence in terms of sentence structure, subject, verb, object, or complement. We also see they can also be used to show adjectives, adverbs, if a word is an adverb or not, or if it's a verb. And as I said earlier, all of this will decide on how you use that in a sentence. It actually decides the position of that word in a sentence. And just like prefixes, we can have more than one suffix in a word. And I think I'll finish it off with this, and then we'll have a break time. So if we have a look at the word education, we saw last week, we had this meaning to or through, and then we have duc, or from ducere or ducere in later Latin, meaning to lead. And then we have this suffix here, ate. We'll talk about this a little bit later. And then we have also the suffix as well. Listen to the pronunciation, education. Not eon or on, education. And that, people, is where I'm going to end the lesson. And we'll be back in 15 minutes. I'll see you after the break. Last year of university in English language and lit. Wow, man, excellent. Very good, very good. So I'm just going to quickly stop the broadcast.